Picture this: two rock legends standing face to face in one of LA's most legendary studios. Ace Frehley believes rock and roll died the day computers entered the mixing booth. Mick Jagger insists you can't survive without evolution. What neither of them knew was that Ozzy Osbourne was downstairs sipping his coffee, hearing every single word of their argument. In exactly 17 minutes, he'd walk through that door, and the conversation would take a turn none of them expected. But before we get there, let's rewind to how this clash of titans actually began. In the heart of Los Angeles stood EastWest Studios, a place that looked like just another modern office building from the outside, but held some of the most important moments in music history within its walls. On that hot June afternoon in 2019, a faint guitar sound seeping through the door of the premier recording room on the 3rd floor signaled that someone was inside. This studio had been home to countless legends, from Frank Sinatra to Radiohead, from the Rolling Stones to Muse, all recording pieces of their legacy here. The walls were covered with sound insulation panels, but each one seemed to whisper stories from the past. Moments when John Bon Jovi laid down vocals, when Tom Waits sat at the piano, when Slash crafted iconic solos. This afternoon, though, two musical giants occupied the room, and the argument beginning between them was about to bring one of modern music's biggest divides right to the surface. Ace Frehley, despite pushing 70, still carried that old fire of a rock icon. He sat in the corner of the studio, vintage Gibson Flying V in hand, wearing a black t-shirt and worn jeans. As he played the riffs from New York Groove, every note carried years of accumulated experience. Across from him stood Mick Jagger, 76 years old but impossibly fit and energetic, dressed in slim-cut black pants and a white shirt. Mick paced back and forth across the room, gesturing with his hands, talking to someone on the phone, words tumbling out in that rapid British accent, nearly swallowing his syllables. "Yes, yes, we'll finalize the Rolling Stones tour dates next week. Just send me the final proposal." He hung up, slipped the phone into his pocket, and took a deep breath. The atmosphere inside the studio was a perfect blend of modern technology and vintage aesthetic. Old wooden panels lined the walls, but cutting-edge digital screens sat right alongside them. As Ace quietly played his guitar, Mick tuned in to the melody, raised his eyebrows, and took a few steps closer. His voice was calm, but carried a slightly critical edge, that British accent coming through as he said, "Still doing hard rock, Ace? I mean, it's 2019. Music has evolved. It's not just about guitar riffs and volume anymore. Production, electronic elements, even hip-hop influences have made their way into rock. But you're still playing the same 3 chords from the 70s. Ace slowly pulled his finger from the guitar strings, lifted his head, and looked at Mick. His eyes showed surprise at first, then a hint of defensiveness crept in. "Evolution? Mick, you and the Rolling Stones are still playing the same blues rock patterns from the 60s. You're just trying to hide it by adding modern production. At least with Kiss, we stay authentic. We preserve the essence of rock and roll." Mick stopped, tilted his head slightly to the side, and that famous half-smile appeared on his face, though his eyes held a certain sharpness. "Authentic? You're authentic with makeup and pyrotechnics. Look, Ace, I love rock and roll, and so do you, but music can't stay static. The Rolling Stones have stayed relevant in every era. We added disco influences, we tried reggae, we used electronic production, but you're still playing the shock me riff like you're frozen in time." Ace stood up, guitar still in hand, his voice now sharper and more defensive. "Frozen in time? No, Mick, I call it staying true to the fundamentals. Rock and roll is losing its soul. Everything's becoming computerized. Auto-tune, programmed drums, synthetic sounds. Real instruments, real talent. They're being pushed to the back. With Kiss, we've always made real music, delivered real performances on stage." Mick took another step closer, pointing his finger at Ace. "Real music? Ace, the world has changed. Young people listen to music on streaming services. If you don't evolve, you disappear. We've reinvented ourselves in every era, and that's why we're still standing, still being played. You, on the other hand, are clinging to nostalgia. At this point, the air in the studio began to shift. This was no longer just two old friends having a polite conversation. This was a collision of two different musical philosophies. Ace set his guitar down hard, the sound echoing through the room, anger now mixing into his voice. Clinging to nostalgia? No, Mick, I'm clinging to principles. The soul of rock and roll is power, energy, raw emotion. But your modern production adds so many layers, you can't even tell what's underneath anymore. The music becomes plastic. Mick's face tightened, his voice cold but controlled. Plastic? The Rolling Stones have always stayed organic. Yes, we use technology, but we do it artistically. You're afraid of technology because you don't understand it. We're building new things on the foundation of blues rock. You're just spinning in circles on the same foundation. Ace clenched his fists, his voice trembling. I'm not afraid. I just have respect. Respect for music's origins, its roots. Hard rock and heavy metal were born from the blues, yes, but they took it to another level. More powerful, more aggressive, more honest. Your modern production just polishes everything smooth, but the soul gets lost in the process. Mick pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and played a track from the latest Rolling Stones album. Electronic beats and synthesized melodies poured from the speakers, but underneath you could hear Mick's vocals and Keith Richards' guitar. Look, Ace, this is modern production, but the soul's still here. Can you feel it? We've merged modern elements with classic rock. Ace crossed his arms, shook his head from side to side. I hear it, Mick, but it doesn't sound like the Rolling Stones to me. It's hybrid. Not quite rock, not quite electronic. Having an identity crisis. Those words cut Mick deep. His face flushed red, his voice rising. Identity crisis? You're talking about identity crisis? Kiss hid behind makeup for years. Nobody saw your real faces. The Rolling Stones have always been authentic, been ourselves in every era. Ace didn't back down. We didn't hide. We just created characters. But our music was always real. No tricks. Every note came from us. Mick slammed his hand on the table. No tricks? You shot rockets out of your guitars. That's not a trick? Ace suddenly walked to the amplifier in the corner of the studio, picked up his guitar, plugged in the cable, and turned the volume up high. Mick watched from behind, trying to figure out what he was doing. Ace turned around, challenge burning in his eyes. All right, Mick, we're not getting anywhere with words. Let the music talk. I'll show you the power of hard rock, and you show me the soul of your modern production. Let's see which one hits harder. Mick tried to object, raising his hand. Ace, this is pointless. You can't compare music like this. Each has its own place, but Ace wasn't listening. He pressed his fingers to the fretboard and suddenly unleashed a powerful distortion riff. The sound echoed off the studio walls, every frequency crystal clear thanks to the modern sound system. But at the same time, that raw, cutting, hard rock energy filled the room. Ace's eyes were closed, his fingers racing across the strings, bringing out that pure rock and roll power from the old days. 10 seconds later, he stopped, turned down the amp, and looked at Mick, out of breath but with victory in his eyes. That's it, Mick. That's real rock. Raw, powerful, unfiltered. Mick stayed silent for a moment, then slowly walked over to the control desk, pressed a few buttons, and opened Pro Tools. Hundreds of tracks, digital effect panels, and waveforms appeared on the screen. He hit a few more keys and a backing track started playing. Modern production, electronic drums, synthetic bass, but layered on top, was a blues-based guitar melody. Mick grabbed the microphone and started singing. His voice filled the room with that familiar tone, but this time it wasn't just the voice. You could hear the richness of the production, the depth of the layers, every element in perfect balance. When the song ended, Mick set the microphone down on the table and turned to Ace. You see, Ace, modern production doesn't kill music. It enriches it. Every layer, every effect serves a purpose. That's art, too. Ace crossed his arms, his voice still defensive, but a bit softer now. Technically impressive, Mick, but it doesn't have that warmth the old Rolling Stones albums had. It's too sterile, too perfect. Mick was about to respond when the studio door slowly opened. The person walking in was someone neither Ace nor Mick expected at that moment. Long hair swept back, round sunglasses, black leather jacket and dark pants, moving with slow but confident steps. Ozzy Osbourne. Despite being past 70, he still carried that legendary energy. In that familiar Birmingham accent, stretching out his words slightly, he said, "Bloody hell, mates. What is this, a rock war? I was sitting downstairs, drinking my coffee, and I could hear you two arguing like World War III just broke out." Ace and Mick froze. Ozzy Osbourne's unexpected entrance instantly changed the atmosphere. The tension gave way to shock. Ozzy took a sip from his coffee, took off his sunglasses, and added with that mischievous grin, "What happened? Old friends going at each other? Hard rock versus blues rock? Or are we arguing about modern production?" Ozzy set his coffee cup down on the table in the corner of the studio, slowly sat in the chair in the middle, and stretched out his legs. His eyes were tired, but that familiar spark gleamed in them. He looked at both musicians and said in that Birmingham accent, "Lads, I was sitting here quietly, but your argument got so loud, even the sound engineer downstairs was thinking about putting in earplugs. What's going on here?" Ace slowly set his guitar down, still with a defensive tone. "Ozzy, Mick here is lecturing us, saying hard rock is outdated, that it's just nostalgia." Mick jumped in, his voice calmer but still sharp. "I didn't say that, Ace. What I said was, music has to evolve, or you get left behind. Blues rock and hard rock are both valuable, but rejecting modern production is just foolish." Ozzy shook his head side to side, raised his hand, and silenced them both. All right, now listen to me. I've been hearing this argument for years. With Black Sabbath, we laid the foundation for heavy metal. We started with blues riffs, then created something dark, something heavy. Later, in my solo career, I even used pop elements. Each one was different, each one was valuable. But I never disrespected one over the other. Ozzy stood up, walked over to Ace, and placed his hand on his shoulder. His voice was soft. "Ace, Kiss is a phenomenal band. You created a theatrical experience. When people go home, they remember not just the music, but that moment. That's art, but..." He turned to look at Mick. "Mick's got a point too. If you don't evolve, you just live in the past. Music needs soul, but it also needs to connect with the times." Mick relaxed his arms. Finally, someone gets it. But Ozzy kept going, pointing his finger at Mick. "But you, Mick, you're being a bit of a snob. Modern production is great, but some people love that raw, unfiltered sound. Hard rock isn't just noise, it's passion, it's energy. If blues was your generation's sound, hard rock is theirs. Every generation finds its own voice." A silence fell over the room, but this time it wasn't hostile. It was thoughtful. Ace and Mick were digesting what Ozzy had said. Ozzy sat back down in the chair, took another sip of his coffee and smiled. "Let me tell you a story. Back in 2015, I was backstage at a festival. Tony Iommi was there, my old Black Sabbath guitarist, and so was Jack White, the star of modern rock. They were both talking about music. Tony said to Jack, 'Your minimalist approach is interesting. Back in my day, we'd crank everything to the max.' And Jack said to Tony, 'Your heavy riffs inspired me. Now I'm interpreting them in a modern way.' That's when I realized music isn't a generational war, it's a continuation. Everyone learns from the ones before, adds something, creates something new." Ace slowly nodded, his voice softer now. "Maybe you're right, Ozzy. I was just trying to protect the value of hard rock, but completely rejecting modern production might be wrong too." Mick took a step back. "I was a bit harsh too. Hard rock's energy is undeniable. Maybe I even miss that raw sound sometimes." Ozzy stood up, walked to the center of the room, and looked at both musicians. His voice was more serious now, more instructive. "Lads, genre wars in music are pointless. I love blues, I love hard rock, I love heavy metal, hell, I even listen to modern electronic music. Each one tells a different emotion. What you're doing is like arguing whether an orange or an apple is better. They're both fruit, they're both different, but they're both valuable. Ace picked up his guitar from the floor, looked at Mick, and for the first time that afternoon, a genuine smile appeared on his face. Maybe we should do something together one day, Mick. I'll throw a solo over a blues-based track, and you add the vocals. Mick smiled too. Why not, Ace? Maybe your energy would add a new dimension to my vocals? They both laughed. The tension had completely dissolved. Ozzy clapped his hands. That's it. Now let's make some music, but this time, no fighting. Ace turned on the amplifier, this time setting the volume to a more reasonable level. Mick selected a modern backing track from the control panel, but this time it was a blend of blues and rock. Ozzy grabbed the microphone and started singing, his voice filling the room with that characteristic tone. Ace added a riff on his guitar, more melodic this time, and Mick clapped along, keeping rhythm. The three of them had a spontaneous jam session together. No planning, just pure musical energy. 15 minutes later, the music stopped. All three were out of breath, but their faces showed deep satisfaction. Ozzy set the microphone down on the table. That's it, lads. That's real music. No ego, no competition. Ace leaned his guitar against the chair. This afternoon ended way better than it started. Mick added, Yeah, I think we all learned something. Ozzy took the last sip of his coffee, stood up, and walked toward the door. He turned back one last time. Lads, there'll always be arguments in the music world. Everyone will defend their own style, but what really matters is, in the end, we all love the same thing. Music. And music doesn't divide us. It brings us together. As he walked toward the door, Ace and Mick looked at each other, this time not as enemies, but as colleagues with mutual respect. Mick extended his hand. I'm sorry for being harsh. I shook it. Me too. Maybe we really could do something together one day. As Ozzy walked out the door, he said one last thing. And remember, music isn't just sound. It's emotion, it's connection, it's a force that brings people together. And the door closed. Something had changed that afternoon. Two old wolves remembered they'd once run in the same pack. And music, as it always does, had been the bridge. If you've ever had a heated argument about music with someone you respect, drop a comment below. What genre do you think defines rock and roll, and where are you watching from?